What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Real Reviews with SOC. Man, I hope and pray you guys are doing well today. Well, today we have an interesting show for you. If you haven't been following us, you should be. So make sure you smash that like button. We've been covering a lot of cult documentaries, cult movies, anything that has to deal with cults. That's what we've been dealing with in season 4. So make sure you click that playlist in season 4. As for what we're going to be covering today, we're going to be covering a Netflix documentary by the title of One of Us. One of Us is a 2017 documentary feature film that chronicles the lives of 3 ex-Hasidic Jews from Brooklyn. The film was directed by Heidi Ewing and Rachel Grady, who also created the documentary Jesus Camp. One of Us opened at the Toronto International Film Festival in September of 2017 and was distributed the following month of October via Netflix, which also financed the film. The film follows the lives of 3 ex-members of Brooklyn's Hasidic community, Ari Hershkowitz, Luzer Twersky, and Etty Ausch. Each struggles with being ostracized from their former community and families while revealing how they came to leave. The film also reveals their experience with religious doubt, as well as with both domestic abuse and childhood sexual abuse. Some receive support from ex-Haredi organizations such as Footsteps, while others work to find a footing in the secular world. The film also follows counselor Chani Getter and her work with helping former ultra-Orthodox individuals and settle into the outside world. Okay, so that's definitely what we're going to be talking about today. But before I get started, let me say what's up to a few of the people in the chat. What's going on, Warrior Woman? I love it when you make it. I know you're watching from across the world, so thank you for being here. What's up, Revelator? How are you? 816 Apology Assault. What's going on, fam? Carl Anthony, what's going on, man? Good evening, good evening. And of course, Roxby, what's going on, sis? Hope and pray you're doing well. Okay, so as you all know, I do not do this alone. I am joined by my brother in Christ, Nate2D2, and my sister, Michelle Turner. What's going on, people? How are you doing?
I go by the name BK Apologist, transmitting all the way live.
There you go. He's here in spirit. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to join us today, so that's cool. God willing, he'll be here for our next review. I'm pretty sure he'll find a way to make it to that one because I'm sure it's going to touch a special part of his heart. If you guys don't know, we are definitely reviewing Wakanda Forever. And so next Monday or Saturday, we haven't figured it out yet. We'll be reviewing Wakanda Forever, and I hope and pray you guys kind of join us and all that good stuff. So we definitely watched One of Us. It's a great documentary. I highly suggest it for all Christians to watch it. I think it's a great insight into the lives of the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community in Brooklyn. But it also raises quite a few questions and situations that not only they deal with, but also many cults and groups like them. So just kind of like an overview. Nate, what was your overall thoughts of the One of Us documentary?
I think a lot of the documentaries or all the documentaries that we have seen, I think, have been necessary, and I'm glad we're featuring them because I think people need to know about it. I think this one in particular has, I found that to be especially true just because I had certain, I think, preconceptions about this Hasidic Jewish community, and I had this kind of notion that they were, a little bit maybe odd from my perspective, and but that they were just there's always been a sort of, I guess, kinship as a Christian felt to those adherents of Judaism. And so I think for what little I knew about the Hasidic Jews, I probably felt kind of the same way, just thinking that they're just another kind of expression of Orthodox Judaism. But it was surprising to see the kind of, I guess, the insularness and the abuse and this like secretiveness that takes place in the community, and it was really surprising, and just to find out what how cultic, I guess, the community can be, or similar to cults. I don't know if it's not a cult in the same way that we've seen other cults. It's not like revolving around like a single person who's trying to take advantage of people. I think that it is a reaction to. It seems like based on the documentary, it's a reaction to, I think, trauma and trying to preserve something. But there is, as a result, I think there is. They do things in a way that causes hurt, and so I think it's important to watch this documentary to at least get one side of it and see the effect that this community has, because I think some people may not be aware of the kind of things that people have had to go through.
Yeah, I totally agree. I know it's kind of weird to kind of try to condense this into a kind of cult in the sense that we're used to. It's very cultish, but in the cults, and like you said, there's not one singular leader, but it's a group of elders and rabbis and things like that that have built a society over a long period of time. Of course, it was the reaction to wanting to preserve a culture and preserve a people, but then it became something else. And instead of it being, I guess, the ABCD cult, okay, follows all these rules, kind of like how Heaven's Gate was. It's a little bit different. And so I'm glad that you did bring that point out, because I think that's very insightful. Michelle, what were your overall thoughts about it? What, did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you, tell me about it?
It was very heartbreaking. And I'll say this: they may not be considered a cult, but they have cultish behaviors within the group. That is very evident in the treatment of people who decide to leave. It's also very evident in the destruction of families. It's evident in the segregation of their community from other people. And so I will say a lot of red flags that come up when discussing this community, as far as the treatment of people that would go, like with anybody else, we would say this is a cult, because of how their reaction was. And again, I get it. Like, for example, the Black Hebrew Israelites, they are a cult. We have no problem with calling them a cult because of what they do. And their reasoning is because it seems that Black and brown people have a lack of dignity in this country. So they do things to try to restore that dignity. So it's like, even if you have a good reason, it doesn't necessarily mean what you're doing is a good cause. So I will say that, but I just thought the whole thing was very, very heartbreaking to me, for how these people were treated just for asking questions, and how they didn't get justice for some of the stuff they went through, but then they want to destroy, people who want to leave. Like that, to me, that was just, I was very confounded by that. Like, you'll put all your resources and money into the destruction of people who want to leave, but you won't get justice for people who are still within your community. Like, it's like this is how you're operating. And because they're segregated, a lot of stuff will go unchecked. And it's not fair to those who are inside enduring some of the more traumatic things. And again, it wouldn't be the whole community that's part of this, because I'm pretty sure not everyone is involved in some of the practices that was discussed in this documentary. But if I'm about to quote South Park,
Oh,
but
oh boy,
but
here we
Cartman
go.
told Kyle one time, silence is violence. And it is, silence is violence. Like, if you see something, and because you're not going through it, and it's not you who's suffering, and you're like, oh well, it's okay, then that's an issue. It's not okay for you to see someone suffering or going through something, and because you don't have the same issue, or that's not something that you can relate to, then where is your love your neighbor as you love yourself? So as we get deep into it, I'll discuss some more stuff, but that it was very sad. Most of these cult things are sad, but this one was very sad. for different reasons than the other ones were sad. Like all these cult films have been like very, very heartbreaking, very emotionally draining, but all for vastly different reasons.
Mm. Good point. Good point. I definitely agree with you in that. You know, I think the statement you made that kind of rung a bell with me was when you said that, you know, they don't want anybody to leave, but they don't also do righteous judgment in the group, um, in order, you know, to kind of keep people in it. It's like they don't do anything for the individuals who are suffering. So the show kind of breaks it up into three stories, three main stories. Oh, well, yeah, three main stories. It talks about Etty, talks about Ari, and talks about Luzer. I hate saying his name because I know the joke is going to come up that he's a loser, but his name is spelled Luzer, so it's pronounced loser. But I like that the documentary kind of broke it up into those three stories. I do agree with Roxby, though. She says, I got so invested in it that I felt like it ended abruptly. And it did
I
for
agree
me.
too.
I totally agree with you, Roxby, because I was like, man, this, I feel like there should have been more, maybe a deeper dive. And that's what happens when you break it up into three people versus just following one individual. You don't have as much time to get in depth, I guess, in the nitty gritty. But at the same time, I do think it was a benefit because it didn't become stale. Sometimes if the documentary, if you don't have enough information on one person, then it can become very stale and look, and it may feel like you're trying to pull. I think this documentary would benefit from like a part two and then get deeper into it. I think it would be really cool. Roxby also says it was interesting that they were willing to hide or ignore the abuse, discourage questions, and try to stifle creativity as a way to preserve their way of life, ultimately to survive. And it was a cult. I mean, that group is a cult, right? So for me, I feel comfortable calling it a cult, even though at the same time, I get why some are hesitant. I mean, because our faith stems from the Jewish faith, right? Jesus Christ was a Jew, period, blank. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But I think at the same time, we have to call this group out in the same way we would call any other group out. Can be a respecter of persons. This group definitely is very cultish, is a cult. Um, uh, it may be run a little differently, and this is where I agree with you guys. It's definitely run different. It's not just one singular leader. It's a group. It's similar to where the Jehovah's Witnesses don't have one singular leader. They have a body of elders. So in this sense, the elders may be more than just, let's say, 8 that live in New York. It may be a whole bunch. So, you know, I definitely get that. Roxby says, I was hoping for an update on Etty at least. I was hoping that her situation turned around and she got her kids back. You know, I know there are updates, but
I
I don't.
Googled her.
Okay, what you found?
She has not, because I was racked. I was like, I got to know what happened to these people. And she was like, they still refuse to let her see her children because
Wow.
they feel, because the status quo thing, because she's no longer in the community and she's not living like them, they feel that she's going to modernize her children.
Mm,
So she still don't have access to her kids. But I'm like, when her kids get older and find out about this, how do you think they're going to respond to their family and their parents who has snatched them away from their mom and seeing how their mom fall for them?
right. Yeah. Definitely. Let me see. Roxby says it's good to keep in mind that the roots of this group stem from fear. These people escaped from a very dangerous situation. Absolutely.
And they brought that up in the documentary,
Mm-hmm.
how a lot of it is because the Holocaust and being afraid of being put back in that same kind of position. So
Right.
they stay to themselves and they try to keep their the original way of worshiping, tradition, and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it also reminds me of like the Mennonites and the more the Mennonites than the Amish, because the Mennonites will at least go to like Walmart and stuff,
Right.
because they be in Walmart. They're like, we're not gonna churn the butter, we'll buy some. Um, but they remind me of like the Mennonites in a way where they're integrated enough in society that you know that they are there,
Mm-hmm.
but they refuse to have so much integration in society that it ruins their way of life. And I get it. Social media, technology, all that stuff can be overwhelming. when you don't have any discipline in your life.
Right.
But at the same token, you can't stop progress. Like, even if you want things to stay the way they are, you can't stop progress. I read a book called Who Moved My Cheese. It's a book about change. I had to read it for one of my grad school classes when I was getting one of my master's in finance. So we had to read that book in my organizational development class. And the book is talking about change, how change is uncomfortable, it's not good. It could stem from fear, it could stem from, all these anxiety and all these other things. But change isn't necessarily bad. How we respond to change can be more prohibitive of our growth in that change than the actual change itself.
Mm.
And I think a lot of times, like, we're so afraid and so anxious that we're scared to move forward. We're scared to start businesses. We're scared to launch out into ministry. We're scared to do all of these things because fear and anxiety is prohibiting us from whatever it is that we want to endeavor in, because we're scared of that changing. We're scared of the unknown. We're scared of what might happen if we allow um these things in, or if we pursue these things. So I think a lot of it in their community is because, like, yes, because this trauma happened, this traumatic experience happened to our people, and now we're going to use this to hold all of us back for generations to come because of the fear that we are holding on to. Because I think it was Ari who was in the park.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Ari who was in the park, and he was like, hey, do they have Wi-Fi around here? Because a lot of the little Jewish boys hang out around here. And he
Mm-hmm.
was like, no, but there's Wi-Fi everywhere. You can't stop them from this. And he said, you want to repent right now? And I was wow. Like there was no kind of, and like we harp on the gospel message and how important the gospel is, and how freeing it is to be a Christian, and how freeing it is, and how the good news is Christ crucified and Christ raised from the dead. Like, our salvation is based on that. Like, without Christ raising, we're nothing. But we know that our Savior rose on that third day. And it's like there was no good news but repent. And it's like, repent for what? There is no good news involved in this repentance. The news that you're giving me is I have to now conform back to a group of rules and laws, and there is nothing, no promise of anything better in this. And at least in Christianity, our promise is to be reconciled back to God. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, yes, you're saying you'll be reconciled back to God, but there's still no good news. Our good news is that we have a King, kings, and the Lord of Lords. We have the Rock of Ages, the Rose of Sharon, and the Great I Am. We have that good news. And it's like, all good news you have to him is repent, and that's it, and come back to the same old thing that brought you this pain that you don't even want to be bothered with anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of really good points. So let's kind of break it down, I guess, by story, right? I think that'll be probably the best way to do it, so we make sure we don't miss anybody in the documentary. So let's talk about Etty first, since that was the first one it was introduced. One of the things I liked about how they told her story was they didn't reveal her face until a certain point. I thought that was very wise to do, because it painted this picture first before you saw her face. I just thought that was a nice directorial touch. And then when it got to a certain point, then they revealed her face. And it kind of, I think sometimes we can hear stories and it doesn't become traumatic until we see a face attached to it. Hearing words and hearing, or kind of, what's what I'm looking for? Hearing a story or reading it on a page is not as impactful until you hear the person tell the story. You hear the emotion in their voice, and then you see that there's a person attached to it. And I think the documentary did a good job in how they did that. So let's just talk about Etty's story. What about Etty and her story impacted you, Nate? As far as Etty goes, what about her story maybe kind of stood out, or something you want to talk about in her story?
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking on not showing her face in the beginning, I kind of thought that maybe that was because when they started filming the documentary, maybe she didn't want to show her face, or she was trying to protect herself.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the time when they actually showed her face, she's like, I can't hide anymore. um and that almost, to me, I was like, okay, maybe she's like, there's something more, that needs to be there are higher stakes here, and I need to kind of hit this head on. um but it I think, I don't know, everything just about her whole situation. It sounded like she was in an arranged marriage. She was forced to get married when she was 18, so that's like hardly like her own life.
Hmm.
And then you find out that this there's this mandatory, having to have sex with her husband every Friday, and then she has like, what, how many kids does she have, like 7
Probably
kids?
like
And
27 years old.
Yeah.
yeah, so it was, and she was, I think we see her having her 32nd birthday in the film. um and so just, I just can't imagine. I mean, me by contrast, I'm almost 40, and I'm still single. I don't have to worry about any of those kind of responsibilities. I don't have to think about, all these kids, and it's just, but she loves them, and she cares about them, and she's doing like all she can to give them a better life, and I think not subject them to the abuse that she's had to deal with.
Hmm.
And I think, what we already alluded to this earlier, but the community who had, well, her ex-husband, who had the backing of the Hasidic community, and all these, I guess, expensive lawyers, were able to get her children taken away from her.
Hmm.
And that really, I mean, that's what impacts me the most, to get back to your question. Because and the thing is that at the end, the reason that the children were taken away was that the court, apparently, or I guess the judge or whoever,
Hmm.
was struck by how the kids expressed love for their mother, and had all these negative feelings toward their father, and to them that signified that they should take them away from the mother and let them be with the father. And it's like, how do you have that kind of control over the secular court system, that the fact that the children hate the father means that they should go with the father? I sort of see what the logic may be, that maybe I think they're thinking, oh, that the mother's brainwashing them, but you can't assume that. Like, that can't be the natural conclusion.
Hmm.
And so now all these kids that want to stay with the mother, that's been doing all these things to protect them, and assuming that she's been telling the truth, she was followed, she was hit by a car when she was on the bike to get intimidated.
Hmm.
The ex-husband's family was banging on her door, and so she's the only like help that she's getting is from, it seems like from Footsteps, which is the group that's helping these, ex Hasidic Jews
Hmm.
who've come out of the community. And it it's kind of mind-boggling to think that, the people that was once your community are the ones that are terrorizing you. And so who is her community? And now they've taken I mean, her community was pretty much her kids and probably the people in Footsteps,
Hmm.
and now that's been taken away from her by who should have been her community, who should have been her village, and who should have been helping her raise those kids. And instead, now they're taking them away from her so that they can essentially brainwash them. And it's important that you have people that you can trust and that you can rely on. um and instead, the people that should have been her family were the people that became her enemy. And that's just, I think we take for granted, those of us who have a family, those of us who have those we love, friends and family, and a good church, don't realize how important it is to have that security. When my mom passed away, my large family and my church family rallied around us when we were in hospice. The other people that had family, they were like wondering, who is that person in that room that all these
Hmm.
people are coming to visit? It's because we had that support. And and I just took it for granted. Really, I was like, oh yeah, it's, I mean, it's my mom. It's, it's just, these are our church people coming. These are our family members coming.
Hmm.
But she doesn't have that at all, and to take care of all those kids pretty much by herself, uh, and then have them taken away. It's just mind-boggling that, you know, I think in many ways the fact that she's still going, and I think it's probably because of her kids, but the fact that she's still going and still able to continue on, I think it shows her strength, and it shows the kind of love that she has, that she's enduring all of this, because I get it, basically it is for her kids that she's been enduring all this,
Hmm.
um, which is, it'll be interesting to contrast that with Luzer's story a little bit later. But yeah, I think just everything that I think the everything that culminated with her losing her kids is really, that's what impacted me the most. And yeah, it's just sad, and you just kind of, you wish that, I think with all these people, you wish that you can kind of just rally around them and show them the love of Christ, and show them that you can find support. And I think, I'll just finish with this. The sad thing is that I think a lot of people, even within the church, they might join for a little while, but they join a local church, and they find they don't necessarily get the abuse, but they're maybe just as alone in many ways. They don't have that support, which is sad. And so I think that's just something we should realize, is that it's important to show people who are in the family of Christ, or who are thinking about joining or seeking it, that community is a huge thing that's important. Community that seeks Christ, mind you, is not just about community, because that's a big thing that the Hasidic community is. I think they're missing the point, is that they're trying to preserve this sense of community, but there's something higher that they're missing. But community is important nonetheless, and I think we should. I think it's a good example to see what they're not, what they've given up, and what we can show them that they can still have, but that has something of true value and true meaning, from the true God. Um, and I pray that they can find that at some point.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There was, yeah, the support group was a big thing. Was it Roxby? She's been saying a lot of really cool stuff on here. I like Roxby. She said, I like that they did that because it helped you understand this was a long process for her. Didn't happen all at once. That was a good director touch, or writer, whoever was responsible for cutting it that way. And then Roxby says, it was even steps to show herself without her wig. That's a good point. They did do that as well. She says she does not want to modernize them, but in a way that they can have good opportunities to make a life, to have choices. It's interesting because when I was thinking about how you were talking about how they kind of put the kids toward the father, even though he was seen in a bad light to some degree. But I think the manipulation happens when the reason in their mind, the reason the kids see him as bad is not because he's bad, is because she poisoned their minds. So that's like, okay, well, we're going to give you to the good parent because this other parent's poisoning your mind about your father. But even though at the same time, that father he was bugged out. Before I give all my notes on Etty, Michelle, as far as Etty's story, anything stand out to you? Anything you want to expound on?
My points are very similar to Nate. What broke my heart the most is when she said her mom and her sister showed up to testify against her.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, my mom is one of the closest people to me. Like, I know if I can't depend on anybody else, I can depend on my mom. I can't imagine my mom showing up to court to testify against me
Wow.
about anything. Let me keep it 100. My mom probably like, you need me to be the alibi.
Yeah.
Like, just to like, and I do. I'm when they like. Sometimes I take some of that for granted because everybody don't have that. And then like and she was like the woman she considered like her sister came and testified against her as well and told her like, oh yeah, he took the kids to a secular library and he took the kids here and like telling them all the stuff she's done. And then one person was like, yeah, I was following her and I took pictures of her on my phone and she had the kids with her and she went to dinner at such and such house. Um, and he didn't have on stockings, he had on leggings. I'm like,
Yeah.
they are really nitpicking. And I couldn't understand either. Like, oh well, your mom is brainwashing you. We'll give you to your dad. Even if that's your reasoning, to tell her to never have contact with her children ever again, that is excessive. To me, that is very excessive. It it shouldn't, even if she is modernizing herself and her children aren't to be modernized, it is very excessive because even when she went to go visit them, even when she wasn't wearing her wigs on a regular basis, she still held to those standards
Mm-hmm.
to be with them. So it's not like she was like throwing all caution to the wind and I'm be postmodern and my truth is my truth and they gonna see my truth. She didn't even do that. She was like, I'll still uphold to these traditions in order for me to be around my kids and be with my kids. And I've read some of the court document stuff too, because I was not very happy with this judge's ruling
Right.
and why they were going back and forth to court. Their kids actually didn't even live with her. So it was very unfair for them to even make this statement that sent them to the dad. The kids live with um, a non-biased family member.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't live with the mom or the dad. And I'm like, so if the kids didn't live with either parent, how are you coming to this conclusion that she's brainwashing these children and they're not even living with her? They're living with someone else. And both the parents had supervised visits at this time. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like this that to me was really, really ridiculous. And I think and we brought up how she didn't show her face. I honestly don't believe she was going to initially. I think she just wanted to tell her story without disrespecting her husband's family and her husband and her family
Mm-hmm.
um, initially. Because you see, like at first they had her name, like parts of it blocked out and all kinds of other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think she was going to actually show her face so people could just, it could be an anonymity. And I think after so much stuff happened to her, and she had to go through all of these things, I think it eventually came to a point where she's like, I can't keep hiding from this because I'm feeding into what they want me to do anyway, which is hide and pretend and not act like these things are happening when these things are happening. And for somebody to have you hit by a bike and they send out a message talk about, oh, we it's gonna be hundreds of $1,000 because they didn't want to just destroy her, they wanted to destroy footsteps too. And they
Mm-hmm.
made that very clear. Like we're gonna send footsteps a message as well. And so it's like in them trying to destroy her, they also wanted to destroy footsteps and they wanted to control her with the court system. And they knew they could control her by snatching her children away from her. And I'm just like, with no, and I looked, and the reason I looked at the court case, I'm like, maybe there was a psychologist or something that talked to the children and determined that they didn't. There was none of that. It was none of that to determine that these kids were being brainwashed or something was wrong with the mom or any of that. It was simply they used the status quo argument in order to take her children from her without her ever seeing her children ever again. Like, and again, even if you want to give them to the father to uphold them in their community so they won't be modern, their mother should still at least have visitation. At the very least, visitation. And to me, that spoke volumes that a secular judge would even do that to somebody's children. That's traumatizing to the kids. It's very disrespectful to the children and it's very traumatizing to the kids. This is how kids become, get antisocial disorders. And this is how they wind up having attachment disorders and stuff like this when you do stuff like this to children. And in your big scheme to ruin this woman, you're also ruining your own children and you don't even care
Mm-hmm.
because your community and you controlling her still meant more to you than your children. And I'm like, that's disrespectful. Do you actually love your kids when you're willing to snatch them from their other parent who's not on drugs? She's not out here acting a fool. She's not fighting in the middle of the street. And you think this is okay. So I feel really bad for her. I actually pray for her afterwards. Her and Luz. I pray for all of them, but specifically those two surrounding their children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of really good points there. Roxby, she states right here. She says she did explain how high the stakes are, losing everyone. There are aspects of this that reminded me of Scientology. She says they manipulate and break families in similar ways. It even seemed like she didn't say anything negative about this group to her kids. I think she mainly focused on enjoying her visits, loving and encouraging them. And also, yeah, I forgot to even think about it. Like her visits were 1 hour a week. That's almost no time. That time disappears as almost as soon as it begins. She said they justified it all saying they needed to save the souls of these 7 children. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like with these groups, you lose community when you leave. One of the things that I liked that the film highlighted, there are other documentaries out there. There was a documentary a long time ago. I forgot what it was called. If I remember it, I'll put it in the description box below or in the comments. But there was a documentary on YouTube. It was very famous, and it showed the community of the Jewish people and the fact that they have all of this support. If some like I like that they stated that if somebody gets sick, there's somebody there to take care of them. There's nobody that's lacking in anything, and this is something that the body of Christ should be like, right? Because it says in Scripture that they're supposed to know you by your love for one another, and this is very attractive. All right, so we have this Jewish group doing this, and you have all of this love and attention. And if somebody gets sick, there's somebody to protect you, to take care of you. They have their own systems. It's a very attractive thing, especially when you look at the secular world and how it doesn't act like that or behave that way. And so I can see how somebody would want to become Jewish and to become part of a community like that, especially if they're lacking family, lacking friends, and things like that. But I also understand why it's so hard to leave. It's because you have all of these friends, these connections, these individuals you grew up with over a long period of time. Because the whole life isn't just going to the Jewish synagogues and just praying. That's not all of it. You know, sometimes that's all you see on TV. But you have all of these families, these family gatherings, these feasts, these celebrations and festivals, all things that we would love to be a part of, as far as like, as having family and friends to celebrate with, celebrating with, just celebrating a birthday, celebrating, somebody being born into the world, celebrating a marriage, and you have that community who's going to provide. That is all very, very, very attractive. And so when an individual just leaves a cult, it isn't just the religious practice or belief system, but it's all of that. And that's what makes it hard to leave. A lot of the time, it isn't, the doctrine is just so compelling. It's, I don't want to lose my mom. I don't want to lose my father. I don't want to lose my sister. I don't want to lose relationships. And interestingly, it said that less than 2% leave that community. And it's not because it's so compelling. I think it's because of the strictness of being brought up in it, but also because of the damage that they're going to get, the bad name, the bad reputation from being shamed. I don't want to, even when I left, and I don't even want to touch on my cult at all. I talked about that ad nauseum, but one of the biggest reasons I didn't want to leave the cult I was a part of is because I didn't want them to talk about me. I didn't want to be seen as wicked in the eyes of the people. I didn't want to lose relationships. So I get a lot of what she went through. Maybe not to that extreme. I didn't have any kids, so I don't know what it feels like to be separated. I can only imagine what it feels like to be separated from your children, especially 7. It's not just one. It's 7 children this woman had by this man. Another one of the aspects on Etty's story that I found interesting was Friday night sex was mandatory. So she's not even being treated as a human being. It's not about love or affection or compassion. It's like, no, you're going to do this. And so I can see where she felt controlled. And then if she says anything, if she speaks up, this is the kind of response she's going to get. She's enduring what it means to speak up against the religion or things like that. I did like the fact that they did show a community group, not a community, I'm sorry, a support group called Footsteps. I thought that was interesting. I thought many of the points that the lady, I guess the leader of that group said, I mean, a lot of the points she was making was very important. And to me, one of the biggest forms was when they said that a Jew cannot turn in another Jew, no matter what. That right there, the reason why I want to bring that up is because I want to ask not only us on the panel, but the people in the audience, what do you think happens when you isolate? You cannot turn in another Jew, no matter what. What do you think that's going to fester? And we can get into, because I think that would be a good transition into Ari's life. What happens when you don't? What happens when you don't turn in another Jew if they did something wrong? And you can't turn them to the outside authorities. It's only within the group. But when that happens, justice usually is not served because it's not looked at from an objective point of view. It's looked at as what is best going to serve the group, not the victim. And I think that's one of the points. And I think this would be a good transition into Ari. As far as you guys, when it came to Ari's story, Michelle, what stood out about his story? Maybe some scenes in the documentary that kind of stood out to you?
His whole story was heartbreaking too. Like this whole thing was just so sad. What stood out to me was I don't think he would have launched into a deconstruction, if you will, of leaving the faith had he not experienced sexual abuse. Because he, like, even when you watch him at the wedding, when you watch him, like, he's the one that's most still immersed in the community out of all three of them. And so he's like 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Like he hangs out wherever they are. He wants to be where they are. He wants to be part of this community. But his hurt from the abuse he suffered is stopping him from fully immersing himself. And like I think he said at one point he tried cocaine and they got him help and stuff like that. And when you listen to him talk, he never actually really, like in the beginning, like listen to his story. It just sounds like, oh, I turned 18. I just wanted to see the world and see what the world had to offer me. And it was very like superficial, whereas the other two, like they had actual reasons. And then like you get into it, he's like, yeah, here's this camp counselor, and then it comes out of why he wants to leave and why he feels like betrayed by this community that he clearly loves, that he clearly wants to be in. Because like I'm watching him at this wedding, and I think that's the part that broke my heart the most. Like everybody's dancing and having fun, and they're dancing in the circle, and they're just enjoying themselves. And he looks like he wants to join, but he feels like he can't because he didn't cut his hair, and he's kind of started to secularize himself more. And then you also see when they had I can't remember the name of the street festival they had, and he's standing there at the festival wanting to also be part of the festival. And they're like, well, you got to stand over there by yourself. So they ostracize him and allow him to still see what's going on. And I'm like, where's all this contentment for the person who violated him as a child? Where's all the contentment for them? Because he was like, oh, he still teaches camp and he's still around children. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that he's done this to. Where was all this contentment for the person who hurt him? And so you see this kid who really wants to genuinely be in this community and be loved and accepted by this community, who's hurting and doesn't know how to really fully express that. And then you see him being ostracized, but not the person who hurt him. That person isn't being ostracized, but he is. And I'm just like, you guys are not helping him. You guys are not, and they're like, the guys like, repent. Where was the repentance for the person who sexually abused his child? Where was it? Where were you guys going to him, telling him to repent and ostracizing him and putting him out? No, you didn't, because you can't turn each other in. So he knows that he can get away with whatever he wants to do to these children because nobody's going to do anything to him. Nobody. His behavior will literally keep going unchecked. Nobody will do anything. But then the person who wants to leave, all of a sudden they're the bad guy. And I'm like, that spoke volumes to me. about how they just allow this to happen. And just again, just watching him interact with so many other people, it shows me he doesn't want to leave, and he loves his community. He wants to be part of it, but he's conflicted because nobody protected him.
Mm. You know, I'm so glad, his story was put on there just because I think it's a good linchpin to that generation for them to see an individual like that, young, curious. And Roxby pointed out something that I'm definitely going to want to talk about. I have it in my notes as well. She said it was hard to even hear his conversation with the rabbi. And that to me, I took so many notes on that. I'm not going to go crazy with the details, but one thing I did want to mention, one thing the Jewish elder said, he said, we don't seek, and this is him asking, he's like, I want to know, does God exist? And these were all great questions. These are not bad questions this young man was asking. But this is what the Jewish elder said. He said, we don't seek to answer questions like, does God exist? But rather what we are doing and what we're doing repetitively. I thought that was interesting because immediately my works-based salvation was triggered, right? Because it's about what you do, right? It's not about who you are. What's your identity in Yahweh for them, right? Because they don't hold to Christ. So what's your identity to Yahweh? It's not about that. It's about what you do and how much you do and how often you do and how consistent you are. And that breeds just, okay, so in that young man's mind, I have to earn this. It's not a relationship with God. It's me just trying to just be good. And that is going to harbor so many issues. And one thing I definitely want to touch on is the Christian community cannot operate this way. We can't be this way. When individuals like him, young individuals come up and they ask us questions, we can't say, well, you can't ask that question. Just believe. That's not a good answer. That's not even the answer God gives us in Scripture. He doesn't say, just believe in me. No, rather, he produces 66 books of information about who he is and his character so that we can have evidence and reasons for why we believe in Yahweh, why we believe in Christ. And I think it's lazy on the part of elders and teachers. It's lazy, it's inconsiderate, and it's unloving to hold back information that could benefit a young man. Because I guarantee if they took the time to nurture him, he would have been fine staying where he was. If they would have answered his questions, because you can tell in his face he didn't want to leave. He wanted to be part of that community. Even at the very end of the film when he's watching, I think it was a wedding or a festival of some sort, and he's just sitting there sad. Just sad because he wants to be part of this community, but there's another part of him that tells him, hey, this is wrong. There's a disconnect here. And so, I hope he runs into a strong Christian one day and can guide him back, because his rebellion is not because that's what he desired. His rebellion, that came out of a lack of empathy, a lack of love, a lack of instruction, a lack of guidance. Any single one of us, if we didn't have guidance, if we didn't have Christ, would be in the same situation he's in, dealing with maybe not the exact same things, but dealing with other things like that. And also, I do want to point out, I'll ask the question, and it's kind of crazy I'm asking the question on the internet, because the question is the internet evil? Because I think that was highlighted in the documentary to some extent, that the internet itself, we have to cut off information from people. I think my answer is no, because of course I'm on the internet, so I would be crazy to think the internet's evil and not use it. I think it's a place. It's just like the world, in the sense that there are good things in the world, there are bad things in the world. The internet is just a hyper, highway to all kinds of information. You can go on evil websites, you can go on good websites. Like when he said, oh man, I found Wikipedia, and it was all this information that he wasn't allowed to study. He's like, if I wanted to learn about anything, I could. But that's what happens when you cut people off and try to isolate them and control them. They cannot interact with the outside world. And one of the things he said that I think is important as well, he says, I didn't want to live a lie. That was the thing. He didn't believe in what he was living. And because of that, he started to question. And in that moment, like if he was a Christian brother or sister, that's the moment where you want to grab them and guide them, because it can either strengthen their faith or weaken their faith. And that's the exact thing that happened, because nobody took them under his wing and guided him and kind of helped them understand these questions and walk through them with in scripture. He didn't have anything to anchor it to except for these emotions that he's feeling. And so that's why I think our responsibility as Christians is to guide and help people understand, hey, this is why you believe what you believe. This is why the Bible is real and true. This is why God exists. This is how you can know God exists. Can you imagine what that young man with proper guidance would have, how much he probably would have worshiped God even more had he been shown, oh, look at creation. Look at how things are made. All these little things that we consider small but are so big to a person who has these questions. Okay, I know I said a lot, but as far as Nate, I don't think you had a chance to speak about Ari yet. I'm sorry about that. But as far as Ari's story, what stood out to you, and what would you like to expound on as far as his testimony?
Well, you guys brought up a lot of good points that I don't think I even considered. But what's interesting about him was when he brought up the fact that he was raped by the camp counselor, or I think he called him a principal,
Mm-hmm.
the principal at the camp. And he says it in such a way where it's like, if you're not listening, you could miss it. If you're only like half listening to the documentary, because it's like, it's such a serious thing, and yet he's just speaking about it so matter of factly.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that you notice about Ari throughout the documentary is that he's either like smoking a cigarette, or he's like vaping, or
Mm-hmm.
he talked about using cocaine. And this kid was only like, I think 18 or something at the beginning of the documentary.
Oh,
We see him
yeah, super
celebrate his
young.
19th birthday. Yeah, and to think he's just separated from this community, and having to do all this stuff on his own. And you can imagine that he's using these drugs because he's trying to numb himself, I think, from just the reality that he's had to deal with. Because when he recounts the story of his abuse, he says he was at camp, and he was in this room when it was happening, and all these kids were looking through the window. So there was all these witnesses, and then people were telling him that no, that couldn't have happened. Or some people were actually saying, oh, maybe you deserved it. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like, that's it's hard to wrap your mind around it. And it's you kind of wonder how he's not more messed up.
Yeah.
How is he not, how is he still kind of being able to be in wonder of something like Wikipedia and not just completely depressed or whatever. And I think it sounds like he still has a relationship with his father, thankfully. I think his father sounds like he paid for the rehab and things
Mm-hmm.
like that when he overdosed on cocaine. So thankfully, because this sounds like a case that could have led to suicide. And I'm hoping that eventually his story leads to him coming to Christ. I mean, it's funny because you actually see him attend a church.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those, like, it's not, I don't think it's quite a mega church, but they have all the lights on stage, and
Right.
the worship band with the hipster pastor. And it's funny because they did one of those things where people are supposed to have their eyes kind of down, and he's like, does anyone, I forget what he said, but is there anyone here that feels like they need redemption
Oh, I
or
remember
something,
that
right?
scene, and it was a
Yeah,
long pause
yeah,
before he put
yeah,
his hand up.
yeah. He looked around, and he was kind of like, and it's and then I think afterwards, he was just like, I like to look at different religions, and so you almost feel like he was just checking it out.
Mm-hmm.
He was, maybe he thought putting his hand up would somehow transactionally lead to some effect or something. I don't know exactly what he was thinking, but you knew he wanted something, right? He could easily have just thought about it. He didn't even put his hand up that high. Like, I don't even know if he was expecting anyone to see it. Maybe he
Right.
just, but somehow there was something in him that was crying out for something. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's why he put his hand up. Just because he needed to tangibly, I think, accept that he was in need, even if nobody else saw. And I don't know, maybe he thought God would see, or something. I'm not sure.
I can tell you that that hand raising, I can tell you just from experience. I shared this
Yeah.
a long time ago, where I was I was so distraught that I was in bed and I put my hand out because I just wanted to feel God. And I think to some extent, like I can relate. And I think that he was like you said, he just wanted to experience something. He wanted to feel
Mm,
something because I believe he believes in God, but he doesn't know God anymore. And so he's just like, because he looked around, the guy next to him had his hand out. But
mm,
then, like, right before the scene ends, he kind of like creeps it up because he wants
yeah.
to. That right there, it's a physical kind of representation of what you're talking about, is that he has that desire,
Yeah.
but he just doesn't know what he desires yet. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy because it's I wonder, and it's funny because I mean, the dog, clearly the documentary crew is in there, and you kind of wonder if they asked permission or what, but it doesn't seem like there was any kind of follow up to
Hmm.
him, and so you kind of wonder what if if somebody had, or if if Ari had gone up to the pastor or something and said his story, or just asked a bunch of questions. You wonder what that pastor could have done for him, if that pastor was even equipped,
Right.
or you know um and the fact that he was there. I mean, sometimes there's this fear of, how do I go out and preach? Here he's coming to them, you know um and seeking and desiring, like actually seeking. Sometimes you have to deal with people that they're just too stubborn, and they're too angry to want to listen. This guy is saying, hey, here I am. What's the deal? And um later on we see him back with the rabbi, and you
Hmm.
kind of get the sense that maybe he probably never went back. I don't know. um for all we know, that could be a good thing. I don't know anything about that church, but
Right.
um it and when we see him with the rabbi, he asked the question about, we hear about kids being raped. Obviously he's talking about himself. He's not just hearing about it, he experienced it.
Right.
And because he's reasoning, because he thinks either, and I think he almost states this like declaratively, like either there's no God, and that's why these things are happening, or or there is, and he says that thing is evil. He didn't even refer to it as a person. He referred to it as a thing, and that thing is
I
evil.
actually have that exact portion quoted because the question that he asked was, why is there so much evil? Either
Mm,
God is evil or there is no God. Like, that's like a classic question.
yeah.
And the rabbi didn't want to answer that kind of question. And I'm like, what are you doing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, and of course I'm thinking of it sort of from like the philosophical apologetics standpoint, where it's like, we can't even, I mean, the fact that you have this understanding of evil makes no sense without a God.
Right.
But at the same time, I understand. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
how how and that's still a difficult question for me. But
Mm-hmm.
the I think without God, what happened to him, it's not even evil. It just
Is an
is.
inconvenience.
It's an inconvenience. It's just something that the whatever evilness that he perceives is just from his own perspective. It's subjective evilness.
Right.
But if there is a God, which we affirm on this channel, then the evilness is it is objectively evil. That there is an actual truthness to the evil that he recognizes
Mm-hmm.
in what was done to him. And the thing is, without God, there there will be no justice for this principle.
Right.
If he goes to the grave without any repentance, without placing his faith in Christ, which I know there's that people have issues with that. But let's just say he continues to do what he does, and Ari mentions this is, oh, he's probably doing, still doing the same thing to these kids,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, again, if you're not listening, you can almost miss that, and you think about the reality of it. There's probably kids being abused right now, and there have been probably who knows how many since his when it was done to him. But the thing is if God is true and this guy goes to the grave continuing to do this, there will be justice for him. There is just there is the and it I think that brings meaning in a sense of, I don't know, order, I guess, or just a sense of sense to this existence, because otherwise it's meaning has no meaning. We're just a bunch of cells that perceive things, and but I think we understand that there's more to this existence than that. And I think Ari recognizes this on he's seeking all this knowledge, and but just no answers for him. And the thing about this community, and I think we see this with Luzer as well, who mentions that when you start asking questions, that's when there's trouble. And it's like with them, they know what they want, which is to preserve their way of life, to preserve their community, to survive only way they know how, and they know how to do it, to get to control the community, and to manipulate and to control information. But they don't know why. There is no why to what they're doing, other than they're trying to preserve. But why are you trying to preserve it? Why do you think that this is the way? What is the value in which you're preserving just for your little community? Right. I mean, you look at Abraham, that the father they would I'm sure they must consider the father of their faith. Right. Was told to be he was blessed to be a blessing. How are they blessing the world, being insular the way they are, and allowing abuse and rape to go on, just so that they can continue operating the way they are without outside interference? I'm guessing that's what their reasoning is, that you allow this evil to happen, that way we don't have outside interference. Maybe that's how they're reasoning it out or justifying it. Right. Because even Luzer acknowledges not all of them are like terrible. They just have community, and he almost wishes that he could have that, but it's just not true. It's not real. It doesn't reflect what he understands, and so it has no meaning. And it's obviously we'll get into him next, I guess. But yeah, it's just sad for somebody so young as Ari to be seeking all these things in the midst of all the suffering and trauma that he's dealt with. And it's like there's nobody there to really guide him. Right. And I'm glad he has some support, but I think we need to be aware and ready to, okay, what is it, the verse we always, the apologists always go to, is it first Peter 3:15 or 2 Peter?
First Peter.
First Peter, right? To be ready to give a defense for the hope that we have. Right. And that's, I think, what he's seeking. And it didn't seem like he found anyone that was at that church, at least, that was able to give that answer. And so that's something we need to be ready, because somebody may come to our doors seeking that hope, and we need to ask ourselves, do we really have that hope, or are we just kind of like the other Hasidic Jews that are just comfortable in our own community because maybe we grew up in the church and we didn't find any reason to leave it because we're not the type of people to ask questions. Right. And so we have our support, and it's easy just enough to just believe. And it just so happens to be true, but it's not something that's real to us, and we just happen to not be abused, and it's just good enough. Um, so we need to be ready to show people, that these broken people that may be seeking, that there is hope. And I think that's the big thing that I think Ari's story kind of tells me.
Man, you,
And
yeah.
and I do want to add really quick
Mm-hmm.
too that Ari's questioning is a product of what happened to him. Him
Mm,
questioning God is definitely
mm,
him what happened to him, and then that happening to him, plus no justice in this community that swears to protect each other and be with each other and hold each other accountable, and there was no accountability for what happened with him. And so you can hear, like, when he's talking to the rabbi, why these line of questionings, because he doesn't say, hey, I doubt that the 613 laws are not good laws. It's never anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It goes to, why does God allow evil? And then we hear his story and we can understand why this is a question he's asking to the rabbi, because he's conflicted. Like, this God that I've been taught about my whole life either doesn't exist or is not the standard of morality that I have been given or taught about in my life.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because one of the things, I mean, even you touched on it, was this idea that these things happened to him and caused him to ask these questions. I mean, think about it from his perspective. He's a young boy. He gets abused by this Jewish elder. The kids are watching it happen, and they say that the reason this happened to you was because of your wild living. So his whole perspective of life is, it's his fault this happened. That's what he's getting. It's his fault that happened, and now his question is, why do things like that happen? And to kind of wave him away with a wand and say, well, we just don't deal with those types of questions, is absolute foolishness. It's a lack of empathy. It's a lack of love. It's a lack of care. It was just about the preservation of a community without caring about the members. That's what that was. And this is how the body of Christ should not be. We should care about, if somebody brings a story like that up to us, we should care to, number one, get justice. Number two, to help repair that person, to bind, to it's kind of like how Paul talks about it. And it's almost like we have to be the ones that mend that broken heart, to carry and bear those burdens. You see, that's what bearing a burden would look like, is that that Jewish elder would come to him and help him and cry with him and be there for him, and just so he can know that he's loved, and that what happened wasn't his fault. But in his head, that's exactly what it was. It's his fault. This is why he's standing outside trying to be part of a community that no longer wants him, that ostracizes him, because his heart and his desire is to be with the ones that he loves. And it's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking. With that said, let's go ahead and transition over to Luzer. I want to say Luzer, because every time I say Luzer, I just feel bad calling, but that's his name. I can't, I know in our English language, we have Loser. We can say loser. He's not a loser. He's a nice guy. But you know what? He did say two big things in this film that told me 100% that this is exactly why real reviews exist. Here are the two quotes. He stated that his biggest influence in understanding the world was based in movies. Right? And so that was the big thing that he said. And I was like, oh my goodness. See, this to me kind of reinforces that what we're doing here on Real Reviews does make a difference, because this shows 100% conclusively that people will look at film, and that's where they'll derive the meaning of their life, their focus, their purpose. So when he said, movies are his biggest influence and his understanding of the world was based on these films, to me, I was like, man, I wonder if the other Real Reviewers heard that statement and thought about it, because to me, that was huge. Because immediately when he said it, it makes sense. right? Remember when I told you guys, earlier in Real Reviews that the directors and the writers have a purpose and a reason for why they are writing. They are trying to influence their audience in some way, in some direction. Now, it's not always an evil direction. I'm not going to just blanket coat every director's ultimate responsibility is just to drive people away. But there are people who are like that. And we can't be ignorant of these things. We have to be, as Christians, careful of what we watch and pay attention to it. And if certain things are triggering, you shouldn't watch it because it will affect you. And you can see that this man, Luzer, was affected by the films that he watched. So much so that he left to pursue a career in acting because it influenced him so heavily. But before I just go off on a Luzer tyrant, Michelle, as far as Luzer, what are some points in his story or during his narrative that stood out to you?
So actually, one of the notes that stuck with me too was when he talked about how he would sneak and watch movies, and the cops was like, "What are you doing over here?" He was like, "Oh, I'm watching this movie."
The fact that he has to hide.
Yeah. But he was but like when he like talked about movies, like you can look at people's face, like Etty, when she talked about her kids, it went from her regular face to you can now see the sadness in her face. And then when Ari talked about, just life, like it was really, you could tell like there was a lot of pain and emotion he was hiding. When you look at, I'm just gonna call him Luz for short. When you looked at his face and he just talked about film and movies and acting, you could see the joy and the happiness in his face when discussing this. Like even from like when he talked about other things, it was very different for him when discussing film because that's what made him happy. Like his whole face lit up. It lit up the way when you talk about Michelle, and it lit up like that. Like everybody knows when you say Michelle's name, your face lights up, the sun, moon, and stars appear before
here
you.
We go.
I mean, but it's a good thing though.
Yeah.
I'm giving, because we all know. But when he talked about film, his face lit up like that, and you could tell it had such a profound effect on why he chose to take the route that he took as well. And so like seeing him do that, traveling around, and then when he did go back into the community, like he said it, he was like, there's really good people there. Not everybody, gets out to, to get you even if you leave. And like he was talking to a couple of them and you could tell they like, you really probably should just come on back, but you out here wilding. His brother-in-law hates him, which I could see why. Like you left my sister with these kids. This is why we don't like you. But then him and his wife tried to hide it because she thought it was going to be a phase. But when she realized it wasn't a phase, she told on him.
Right.
And so we focus heavy like on Etty and how she lost her kids. And I think the same thing for him. I didn't know this man had kids. Then he started going through his pictures.
Oh, that scene was hard.
That was hard for me. So it's like he's been like very upbeat this whole time. He's not talking easy about the community. He really focused more on himself and his dreams and what he wanted and how like it was suffocating for him to stay in this community. But when you see the pictures of like they didn't show us his kids, but him seeing the pictures of his kids, he broke down. Yeah. And it's like he's trying to, the same thing I can imagine Etty's probably doing. You're trying to find all these things to stop this pain that you're feeling because you want your family and your success, but your community is forcing you to choose between you following your dreams and your family. So it's like a lot of times they're like, oh, they just did this to Etty and they stole her kids. They did the same thing to him. When you lose this community, you lose your family. And he lost his kids as well. And I don't think the focus was as much on him losing his children as it was on her, because it's more touching when a mom loses her kids to, the evil community. But he lost his kids to the same evil community.
Right.
Like he can't go see his children either. Like he can't go visit his kids. He can't go there and and be like, hey, I want to hang out with you guys, because the status quo is not on him either. And I think that's what broke my heart too for him, is that he lost his family. Like, yes, he's pursuing what he wants, and it's like, how do you decide? Do I stay and I live my life very unhappy, never getting to pursue what I actually want? I'm in this arranged marriage. Now we have these children, and my wife is going to, because he was willing to pretend. He
Oh
was
yeah.
willing, like, you could tell he was willing to pretend until his wife told on him. He was like, we'll pretend, you don't say nothing, and I'll just keep faking it, even though I don't really want to do this. And once his wife realized that he wasn't going to come back and he was over it, he just was like, well, you went out, I'm gonna help you out. But it destroyed his family. And it's like, we don't, as much as we're like, oh, Eddie's husband was cruel. I think that was cruel of her too,
Mm-hmm.
to do that and destroy her family as well. And then now her husband is without his children, because he's now ostracized from the community. So my heart broke for him, because at first, like, his story was the one that I had hoped for. Like, yes, he's happy, he's out here living his life. He left. He's pursuing his dream. He's been influenced by something. He's not out here, acting a fool. Until that part, and that's when I realized this is how damaging him leaving was for him as well.
It's interesting because one of the things, and actually, Roxby brought it up. She says his reading of the script and then the feedback from the director producer guy, that was interesting to me. He was asked to draw on his experience to communicate it in the reading. Now, I remember. Thank you so much for that comment, Roxby. I remember in the when he started opening up about wanting to be an actor. His initial thing was, I want to corner the Jewish market. Like, he didn't want to like get rid of his Jewishness. He actually wanted to utilize it and to kind of turn attention to the Jewish community in that sense, and kind of be the Jew of Hollywood in a sense. But and then Roxby, she says, was the roles he played kind of a way to stay connected to his former community? That's a very interesting thought, because I think yes, to some degree, because you got to think about it. When you're raised as a Jew, in this community, surrounded by so many people you love, you don't have shame for it until something happens. And when that thing happens, when you're kicked out, when you're traumatized, then it becomes, you don't want anything to do with it. But as long as everything is gravy, you're okay. This is a beautiful thing. And this is why it's so important that we as Christians, when you take the opportunity to teach and help people grow and guide them, not to just shut them out from the outside world. That doesn't work. It just amplifies the desire to want to see what's happening out there. But rather, it is a lot more wise to come alongside someone and educate them about the world. Say, okay, you see this is why this is bad, this is why this is, so forth and so on, so that they can see. And that, yes, you can look at the film, but remember, there's meaning behind this. It's not just, mindless entertainment. You know what I mean? And so I think it's just important that we kind of look at it from that perspective. And I think to some degree he was seeing that as well, and that he could marry the two and use it as an opportunity to kind of reach a whole nother group of individuals. But Nate, as far as Luzer is concerned, like, what are some of your thoughts and maybe some things that stood out to you about his story?
Before they go, I
Okay.
do want to point one thing out really quick. I think his going for strictly Jewish roles was more of a homage to his community, because it was never like Jewish roles where they were disrespectful to
Right.
Jews. They were always like a Jewish role where Jews were portrayed in a positive light. So I think a lot of that was more of a homage to his community, that he still loves his community. He appreciates the community for what it is, and he appreciates being Jewish. He just wanted something different.
Yeah.
I kind of thought maybe he was trying to be like the Hasidic Russell Brand or something, where you just exploit your uniqueness. That's what it sounded like. But one thing that struck me about his story it reminded me or made me think of Ari and his drug use, and I almost wondered if the his taking the these acting roles was in his own way a kind of escape from the pain that he was feeling, because it because you're playing these roles, and it's almost like you're able to become this other person and experience this other life, but in the end, when the role is done, there's no consequence to it. And I think he kind of alluded to that when he was talking to I don't know, the guy with the glasses, the funny glasses that flipped up. He
Oh
was
yeah,
saying
yeah.
that there was what is in real life. This doesn't have, I haven't lost anyone in real life. There's none of this has happened, which I thought was a funny line because he had lost someone in real life. But
Right.
um, at least in his current life, he can take these roles and I guess use his pain to live them out. But like at the end, it's like um he can get back to a life where it's there, at least in his mind. I guess maybe there's no stakes, but at the same time, I can imagine that it also allows him um to almost vicariously experience life through the roles that he's taking. And I think that's kind of like what I mean. I feel like it's similar to what we do when we watch TV or we play video games. And these days that have huge storylines,
Hmm.
it's a way to escape and kind of live a life. But there's like an undo button in a way, or there's a save point that you can go back to,
Right.
at least with these. Um and that I felt like that's what he was almost doing, because he'd lost his community, because I mean, I guess they they kicked him out. It's funny we talk about what he lost because his name is Loser, so
Right.
he lost this lose this. But um and I think at the thing that really was interesting to me with him was at the end. He was talking about how these people, the Hasidic community, they have their community, and I think he doesn't begrudge them for that. And he said they have meaning and purpose, but when you start asking questions, that's when things go wrong. I kind of said that earlier. I forget exactly how he said it, but it's funny because the meaning and the purpose that they have, it's not even real, and yet he's kind of okay with them feeling that sense of meaning and purpose. um he couldn't play along with that. He couldn't take that role. He couldn't play that role. um or at least he couldn't, uh I mean, I guess he was trying to live the double life, but he couldn't tell himself that there was meaning in that. And at the same time, it's like, what is the meaning and purpose that he's trying to find? Is he trying to find something that actually has actual meaning based in truth, or
Hmm.
that just makes him feel a certain way? And it almost seems like that's what he's looking for. He's like, well, I just want what they have. It just what they have doesn't do it for me. And uh I almost feel like that's what he's chasing with all these roles that he's doing, that he's taking, because it's just a way of numbing the lack of meaning that comes from his real life.
Right.
And even though he's not willing to take those risks, it it's still empty. And um yeah, so um it, I mean, all of them have they're in need of this thing. And obviously, as a Christian channel, we know it's Christ. That's what they need. They have a Christ-shaped hole in their heart, and they're chasing all these things, um, to fill it up. Um, and it's funny. Michelle mentioned uh, when he was hiding in his car so he could watch movies, and the cop came up to him and said, "Well, what are you watching?" He's, "Oh, it's this movie Crossroads by Britney Spears, or starring Britney Spears.
Yeah.
It's great." And
He
it's
says
like,
great.
"Oh, it's great." Yeah, I, and I totally forgot that she even made that movie.
Me too.
I was like, "Oh, right, that was around the time, like,
Should
I
never
think, what
been
was
made.
it? Yeah, I've never been seeing it, but I heard it's great. So,
I mean, we
you know
have
what though?
Luzer's opinion and review on it. It
Yeah,
was great.
yeah. So maybe I got to check it out. But you know what, Luzer, God is greater, and I hope I hope you find Christ, the true Messiah. That I hope the rest of your community does too, because he has come, and there's meaning, and you know your community can be a lot greater than what it was and what you left behind, and the true community of Christ is going to be there to, because when one member of the body suffers, the whole body suffers. So your pain is our pain.
Yeah.
So then that's something truly beautiful, and that's something that has true meaning, and I just, we should pray for all these people, because this documentary is from 2017. I don't know what they've all dealt with since then, but yeah, I hope they find true meaning.
Yeah. I hope so too, man. And those are very touching words. And if they ever come across this video, what I mean, because the internet is vast, and it can reach people, and hopefully, if you guys, any of you on the documentary, if you ever come across this video, I just want to let you know that my email is servantofchristministries@gmail.com. Feel free, and I'm here. We're here to reach out and help, if you do come across this video, because it could be the reason that Real Reviews exists. You know what I mean? To reach out to individuals who are in Hollywood or things like that, who are looking and seeking, and they just come across somebody who reviewed their film or their movie, and they were in it, and documentary, and maybe we can help them. God willing. God willing. Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap it up. So as far as I'll go ahead and give my final review and what I thought about it. I thought it was a great documentary. I thought it was very well filmed, very well told, the story. It left you wanting more because I wanted to know more about the story. I don't want them to go through more pain, but because it's very hard to share stories like that. I know from personal experience, it's very difficult to relive and kind of talk about it. That's why, what was it, the last time I was on Veda's channel, I had never broken down telling my testimony. And that night I was breaking, and I think it just all hit me all of a sudden, like what's actually happened. And so I understand what it is for them to share something that difficult. And now it's captured on film and is always going to be seen. So it's always there. And so, I did like how the documentary captured it. I thought they delved into the lives just enough to get a good taste of what happened without going so far deep that you traumatize or hurt the people that are sharing their stories. As far as a documentary goes, I'd give it 5 stars. I thought it was a very well done documentary. The pacing, the way it was shot, the creativity in telling the story, the introduction to little groups out there like Footsteps that are reaching out. And it kind of motivated me, like, what are we doing as Christians? What kind of groups do we have to reach out to different cults and ex-members? If you guys don't know, I do have a channel called Servant of Christ Ministries. I have a playlist titled Cult Hurt. I go through all of like the basic things that ex-cult members deal with in hopes that they won't have to deal with that alone. So if you're interested, go to Servant of Christ Ministries, click on the Cult Hurt playlist. Make sure you watch those videos and spread those videos, because I know there are a lot of individuals out there who are hurting. And so hopefully that can actually bring them some solace and peace in helping kind of get through a lot of that pain and trauma. So 5 stars for me. I thought it was a great documentary. I thought it captured everything well. And I can't wait to, if there's a part 2, I definitely want to review it. I know definitely get into it. But that's my my little 2 cents about it. Nate, what is your review?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Cult Hurt series, by the way. I was going to mention it if you weren't going to mention it. But also, you mentioned your appearance on Veda's channel. People should definitely check that out. Is he a real one? Veda Real MC. Just search that up, or maybe one of the mods can put that link in the chat, because that is definitely worth watching. And for if anyone just happened to come across this and is dealt with leaving a cult or cult-like group, I think it's going to be powerful to watch that testimony, and as well as the Cult Hurt series. But I think I would probably, I don't know, maybe 4.5 out of 5. I mean, that's just in terms of, I don't know if there's anything more they could have done to improve it. I mean, they did a really good job. And everyone should definitely check it out. Rate it on Netflix, maybe give it, hit that you loved it or liked it or something. Maybe that will prompt Netflix to do a follow-up on it, because it's been, I guess, 5 years at this point. I know the R. Kelly documentary. Well, that was on I think Lifetime, but they did do a follow-up like a year after, I think, the original one. So if there's enough interest in it, I think they would follow up. I would love to find out, to hear from them directly what's happened. But yeah, this is a good documentary. I forget if I mentioned this. I think I did mention this in the beginning, but I had no idea that the Hasidic community was like this, and I think that's part of maybe the reason that they've been able to continue and operate like this. And obviously it isn't all abuse. There's probably people, I mean, just like Etty, Ari, and Luzer, who came out of it, that they just continue to accept it, and they're happy in it. But clearly, the way that they're doing things allows for abuse to continue, and so I think we should be praying for them. I think it's good that the documentary was able to expose this and show. And I think it was great that these 3 people were willing to share their story and to deal with all that and be vulnerable in front of us. So big shout out to them. If they're watching this, and just say thank you for doing that. And thank you to the producers for covering the story too. Everyone definitely should watch this if you haven't yet. It's only 90 minutes. It's not like the other documentary we did with which was like 5 or 6 episodes. Right. This will be really easy to watch, and well, it's quick to watch comparatively. Maybe not necessarily easy, but and it is eye-opening. So and I hope I hope our analysis of it was helpful as well.
Cool. Thank you. And Michelle, you will have the final word. Your thoughts and your review, sis.
So I don't really know how to rate it.
5 stars. Just give it 5 stars. Don't be like Nate. Nate just wanted more pain, and that's what gave him that.
So I want to say 5 stars. The stories were told in a way to where they were all told very differently. Like Etty, it went from like she protecting herself, her family, not showing her face, until finally like, I can't keep living like this. Ari is like, oh, he's a rebellious teenager, and then you get into his story, and then Luz, he's like, oh, I just want to live my dream, and then you get into his story. So then you see like it make me appreciate the fact that we can't always go off the surface of stuff. We can't always just go with, like you can't judge a book by its cover. That is true in most instances. Some books you can, some books you can't, because if we just go off the cover of these books, it'd have been a rebellious teenager and a guy who just wanted to break to go get famous in the acting world, and neither one of those things were true about their their stories.
Mm-hmm.
So I will give it 5 stars for just how it was told and how it initially seemed one way. And then as you get deeper, you find out the truth. And it also makes us to be more, to pray when we speak to people and ask for discernment from God and to actually look to get to the root of something. If somebody say they're okay and it doesn't seem like they're okay, have some more compassion. And Nate brought up 1 Peter 3:15. A lot of times we like to stop at to be ready to give a defense at the hope that lies within you.
Mm-hmm.
But it says with gentleness and respect. We
Mm-hmm.
nobody ever quotes that part, but we're always quick give a defense of the faith and apologia. That's what it means.
Yeah.
But we never quote that part. And I think we should be ready to give a defense of the hope that lies within us. And I think in Ari's instance, with gentleness and respect, would have went a long way. To say
Mm.
without a moral lawgiver, we have no standard of morality. Let me tell you about Jesus and give him love and respect would have went a long way with him because he's seeking something. He's seeking to have something. And, just with Etty, just somebody to within the community to say, I love you. You matter. What you're going through matters. How you feel matters. I'm going to help you with trying to get your kids back within the community. I think that would have went a long way. And, I just think that we have to be more cautious when we deal with people as well. Um, as Christians, as for those who consider themselves apologists or evangelists or disciple makers, we have to be very diligent. I think um, one of the provisions that God gives us is our community, and I'm very thankful for our community that we have because it is a very loving and corrective community. Um, and I think we need that love and that correction in our lives. And I think when we have overcorrection and no love and too much love and no correction, both ways can go bad. So I'll give it a 5 stars. I want to say I enjoyed it, but I didn't. Like I enjoyed it for what it was,
Yeah.
but to see like I hate seeing families destroyed. I hate seeing children traumatized. And both of those things were in there. And I'm like, oh, thanks again, Jordan. Thanks again. Um, but I will say that if, again, just to piggyback, if anyone who's involved in this sees this, we genuinely love you. Like, we don't have to have met you in person to not love you. We genuinely love you. We pray God's peace be with you. If you need some questions, if you have questions and you need answers, you can email SOC. He knows everything.
I don't know
Um,
everything. Don't believe that. But I will try
but
my very best to find the answer and help you.
exactly. And when after I watched this documentary, I actually went and prayed for all three of them, because of how sad it made me.
Mm-hmm.
And so just know that people are still praying for you. I felt the same way after watching the other cult documentaries. Like I went and prayed for the families of those in Heaven's Gate, and I prayed for the survivors of R. Kelly. I pray for the people who got out and are still stuck in Warren Jeff's call. Like I pray for those people after because it's like it's so heartbreaking to see people and to know that we have the answer that is sustainable and true. And then people are out there looking for that. And we need to be more about our business of ministering the gospel to those who need it. So that's it. That's all I got.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me on here. And so let's close it out. I want to thank you all for being here on Real Reviews, and make sure you guys tune in. I'm going to say Monday, but if I change the date, I'll let you know. Monday on Real Reviews, we're going to be reviewing Wakanda Forever. It comes out this weekend. Me and my wife are going to see it on Saturday. Our Michelle over here, she gets to see it before everybody. What day they can't hear you. Hold on, let me go back. All right.
I'm going.
When
I'm going
when
to
are
see
you
it
going to see it?
Thursday.
It's Thursday. Nate, you're going to see it on Saturday morning.
Mhm.
I'm seeing it
Yeah.
so I'm going to be watching it after everybody. So Saturday afternoon is when I'm watching it. But anyway, let's go back out. Okay. So make sure you guys go ahead and make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below with your thoughts about this documentary. Tell me if you're going to watch it, if you haven't seen it already. And then if you do, come back here, let us know what you thought about it. So again, thank you for joining us so much here on Real Reviews. And we will see you next Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is the predestined time for us to be here. Okay, so until next time, God bless, take care, and we'll see you on the next review. Peace.